Hey guys, tonight we're going to take a slow, sandy stroll into the land of pharaohs, pyramids, and toothpaste. Yes, you heard that right. While the towering stone monuments of ancient Egypt may steal the headlines, there's a quieter, far more personal story that hides in the ruins, one that begins in your mouth. The morning sun casts long shadows across the reeds. The air is heavy with the scent of wet earth and lotus flowers, and your teeth, well, they ache a little. You haven't invented Sensodyne yet. And the royal banquet from last night, full of crunchy bread and sticky dates, has left some rather unpleasant things wedged between your molars. You're not a pharaoh. Not yet, anyway. I love seeing where in the world we're drifting off from together. But if you want to smile without offending a sun god or two, you're going to need some serious oral care. So picture this. You're trudging barefoot along the banks of the Nile. On the walls are figures, men and women, with stiff black wigs, brushing their teeth. Not quite. While historians praise Egypt's abundance of bread and beer, what they often dainty mention is that both of those staples were loaded with gritty sand and stone dust. Their flour was ground on rough basalt slabs, which meant that, over time, tiny particles of rock made their way into every loaf. While China and India have their own ancient tooth traditions, it's Egypt that may have first said, "Hey, maybe we should do something about this breath that smells like a mummified fish." It wasn't luxurious, but it beat the alternative, letting the Nile's bacteria throw a rave inside your gums. Chewing a bite of Egyptian bread was a bit like licking a salt lick dipped in pebbles. He doesn't look like your modern dentist. There's no fluorescent light buzzing above, no waiting room full of outdated magazines. Not everyone loved at their S1 ancient note of a patient spitting out the god's salt, but it became a habit, a daily rhythm, like brushing your teeth while half asleep at 6:45 a.m. But he is performing a form of dentistry. He mixes Natronajep's favorite cleaning agent with water, forming a paste. Before fluoride, before electric toothbrushes with Bluetooth apps, before coconut oil pulling trends, there were powdered ox hooves, salt, and a priest whispering a blessing into your molars. A little incense, a prayer to Thoth, the god of wisdom and healing, and then the patient opens wide. The Egyptians had figured out that certain wood fibers, especially from the Salvadora persica tree, naturally cleaned teeth and even contained antimicrobial properties. This wasn't random chewing. It was oral science with ancient flair. Some were gritty, made from crushed ox hooves, ash, and burnt eggshells. Others were oddly fragrant, combining myrrh, mint, and salt. One recipe even included brace yourself crocodile dung. We'll get to that stinky detail soon. But one holds a twig, another leans over a ceramic bowl, and the last one, yes, that's a priest. Sprinkling something into a man's mouth. Even the rich whose diets were slightly softer wore their teeth down by middle age. You might imagine a haughty noble reclining on silk pillows, nibbling on honeyed figs, but he probably had a molar that looked like a crumbling cliff. A dental ritual. Who knew? Oh, and spoiler alert, 2 probably wouldn't survive this version of Egypt. They don't say brush twice a day. Phrases like purification of the mouth pop up alongside washing of the hands and anointing of the limbs. These were people who believed the body had to be cleansed, physically and spiritually, before it could interact with gods or even neighbors. You don't offer prayers with a sour mouth. It's just rude. The heat alone would melt your reusable water bottle, and let's not even get started on the crocodiles. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and the time you're tuning in. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step into a painted tomb, the limestone cooled against your palms. You might imagine they spent their time worshiping deities and building pyramids. But a surprising amount of daily life involved fighting off bad breath and keeping plaque at bay. The ancient Egyptians were, oddly enough, obsessed with cleanliness. Clean bodies, clean linens, and yes, clean mouths. Why? For starters, the Nile didn't just provide water and fertile soil, it also gave rise to a cuisine that was, frankly, rough on the teeth. This culinary sandstorm did no favors to ancient enamel. Dental wear was practically guaranteed, so they came up with solutions. In fact, Egypt holds one of the earliest records of dental care in the world. They didn't call it toothpaste, of course. The term didn't exist. But they had recipes of paste or powder to rub against the teeth. And the users, not just the elite. While pharaohs certainly had access to the best mouth-cleaning materials, commoners likely used simpler versions, perhaps just a finger dipped in salt and charcoal. Curiously, some tomb inscriptions describe daily rituals involving mouth care. And then there's the priest. Imagine him now, robed in linen, holding a bowl of white powder and a bundle of aromatic herbs. Did it work? Kind of. Their toothpaste scratched off plaque, freshened breath, and left a chalky aftertaste not unlike licking a bar of soap. One traveler from the Greek world centuries later noted that Egyptians had peculiar customs of hygiene, which probably meant they keep sticking twigs in their mouths, and I don't know why. But those twigs, surprisingly effective. As you settle deeper into the quiet sands of time, you begin to realize just how inventive these people were. And somehow, that makes the silence of the tomb around you feel comforting. You stretch a little deeper into the shadowed corridors of the past, brushing your fingers along the sandstone walls, each groove cool and ancient. The air still carries the dry sweetness of incense burned thousands of years ago, mixed with a hint of dust and old barley. Not exactly polite. But welcome to dinner in ancient Egypt. The land along the Nile was rich and yielded generous harvests. No matter how skilled the baker, no matter how fresh the loaf, it came with a crunchy surprise. Imagine biting into what should be a soft dinner roll and hearing your molars grind like mill wheels. Some skulls show molars worn flat as coin faces. A few even reveal deep abscesses, evidence of infection that likely caused headaches, fevers, and possibly early death. But in typical Egyptian optimism, they just kept chewing. Toothaches were common, and untreated infections could make life miserable. While many modern cultures just endured bad teeth until dentistry evolved, Egyptians tried to get ahead of the problem, because what else are you going to do? There were no dental surgeons, no Novocaine, and definitely no tooth fairy. There was a class of practitioners known as SWNW healers who handled all kinds of ailments, from stomach trouble to head wounds. A few were even specialized enough to deal with oral afflictions. Didn't have the title dentist as we understand it, but the job description? Uncomfortably close. Just grit your teeth literally and go about your day. They cleaned mouths with rough powders, soothed gums with herbal salves, and sometimes stuffed linen soaked in honey into cavities. The rich had specialized powders and imported resins. The poor might resort to salt or sand, applied with a damp cloth. Some scholars believe Egypt may have had the first dental school. In a temple inscription from the reign of Pharaoh Djoser, a physician named Hesira is described as the greatest of those who deal with teeth. That's about as close to Dean of Dentistry as it gets in 2600 BCE. Historians still argue whether his role was medical, ceremonial, or something else entirely. But his title? Pretty clear. It wasn't glamorous, but then again, nothing about scraping your teeth with ground-up stone ever is. That's right. Your first Egyptian filling may have been cotton candy flavored. Kind of. Maybe. You could be eating gravel-flavored beer bread and brushing with crocodile dung. His breath carries hints of mint, clay, and perhaps, if you sniff carefully, the faint sting of vinegar. He nods at you, grins wide. Just a little relief, a bit of freshness, enough to start the day without wincing. His teeth are worn, yellowed, maybe missing a few, but clean. You can almost picture it, a ghostly figure wandering the field of reeds, pausing for a little dental maintenance before greeting the gods. A toothache wasn't just physical, it might be the result of a curse, a spiritual imbalance, or the wrath of an offended household deity. That's where your friendly neighborhood temple priest came in. It's like eating a baguette mixed with beach sand twice a day. And in Egypt, imbalance in the mouth meant something was wrong elsewhere in the body or spirit, so tooth care became a way to restore harmony. You're not just brushing your teeth, you're brushing your soul. Wheat and barley were ground by hand, usually by women using stone mills. While the process was diligent, it wasn't exactly dental friendly. And dinner, as you're now learning, was the beginning of all tooth trouble. Egyptians adored their food. Their staples were bread and beer, not just consumed daily, but practically worshipped. These sticks, rubbed against the teeth and gums, weren't just placeholders, they actually cleaned quite well. One common tree, the areca tree, had natural antiseptic properties. Think of it as Mother Nature's travel-sized Colgate. Egyptian beer was thick, almost porridge-like, often unfiltered and sweetened with dates. It didn't rot your teeth like sugary drinks today, but it didn't clean them either. And paired with all that sandy bread, you've got a recipe for erosion. The grinding stones wore down, and their sand, grit, and mineral flakes made their way into the flour. The beer, meanwhile, wasn't the fizzy amber liquid of modern pub culture. Historians examining mummies and skeletal remains have found worn teeth in individuals as young as their 20s. Still, it wasn't just the ingredients, it was the frequency. Egyptians ate often. Workers on the pyramids were famously paid in beer and bread. That meant constant chewing, grinding, and wearing down what little enamel nature gave them. You might think ancient laborers suffered through dry rations, but no, this was gourmet gravel. Every bite a slow-motion tooth file. So naturally, the mouth became a focus of care, not because they were obsessed with beauty, but because it hurt. And this brings you to the oddly charming overlap of medicine and religion. To the ancient Egyptians, no separation existed between the physical and the spiritual. But not just any priest. Their tools were primitive, but their intent was earnest. Some records suggest these early dental specialists also believed in balancing bodily fluids, yes, like early Greek medicine later would. And we do mean brushing, though toothbrushes in the modern sense didn't exist. Chew sticks, made from local trees, were widely used. Even the elite took part. In fact, some nobles were buried with their chew sticks, suggesting they believed they'd need to freshen up in the afterlife. Still, not everyone had access to the best care. One curious fact? And so, you find yourself in an ancient alleyway, watching a man sit cross-legged, chewing thoughtfully on a twig, occasionally spitting out something dark and chalky. And that, in a way, is what the Egyptians were after. Not perfection. Not Hollywood smiles. So, next time you grimace over a slightly burnt piece of toast, or complain about your toothpaste flavor being too minty, just remember it could be worse. Which, by the way, is coming up soon. You're sitting now, maybe in a shaded courtyard, maybe beside a basin of perfumed water, and across from you is a priest with a golden pendant and a very serious expression. Illness, pain, discomfort, they weren't just random biological happenings. They were signs. Messages from the gods, or worse, signs of a curse. And so the person who tended to your teeth wasn't always just a healer. He might also be an interpreter of divine displeasure. He's not here for confession. He's your dentist, sort of, by Egyptian standards anyway. He's recited purification hymns all morning. He's bathed in lotus-scented water. He holds a small bronze instrument in one hand and a clay jar of what you hope is toothpaste in the other. The line between medicine and ritual is blurry in ancient Egypt. This figure, known as a wab priest, is likely both spiritually clean and medically trained.
Ow.
You open your mouth, somewhat cautiously. Ah, he murmurs. The demon in your molar is stirring. According to a handful of translated medical papyri, certain oral hygiene rituals included mixtures of dung-off and crocodile, sometimes donkey combined with honey and incense. Some suggest that it wasn't actually toothpaste, but rather part of a magical charm or curse-breaking ritual involving the mouth. Others believe it was truly medicinal crocodile dung, being rich in certain enzymes and antibacterial compounds. Despite the aroma, was it symbolic? Maybe. The crocodile was a powerful creature in Egyptian lore, often associated with fertility, chaos, and protection. Trial and error was the name of the game. Sometimes error meant rubbing swamp poop on your teeth. It had antimicrobial properties, smelled nice, and helped mask the bitterness of other ingredients. Mint was cultivated along the Nile and likely made its way into early breath-freshening pastes. The mouth was considered sacred, after all, the gateway of breath, speech, prayer. You spit into a clay bowl painted with protective symbols, then dab your lips with linen soaked in palm oil. Think of it as a protodental scaler, used to scrape hardened buildup from the teeth, gently if you were lucky, firmly if you weren't. The whole process could take half an hour. Not bad for a society that didn't have Netflix to distract you. To cleanse it was not just a matter of hygiene, it was an act of devotion. Cinnamon bark and cardamom seeds were sometimes chewed, especially by those with social aspirations. Or insert linen soaked in medicine directly into the cavity. Did it help sometimes? Did it hurt? Definitely. A courtier hoping for favor at the palace would chew sweet herbs to avoid offending royal nostrils. There's something oddly soothing about imagining someone taking such gentle, deliberate steps to protect your smile, even if it means using ingredients we'd ban from modern kitchens. You might have had a mixture of honey, crushed myrrh, and ground limestone applied gently to your teeth. It stung a little, sure, but it also worked. Smearing a bit of its essence on your gums might be been seen as invoking its strength or warding off malevolent spirits. He says a final prayer to Sekhmet, lion-headed goddess of healing, and you're sent on your way. A toothache wasn't tea just because of too much sandy bread. It could be a demon gnawing at your roots, or a spirit lodged behind your tongue. So the treatment involved not just paste and scraping, but also chanting. The powder he has smearing on your gums might contain natrana, naturally occurring soda ash found in the deserts. Probably won't get the mouse formula. That one was usually reserved for internal ailments, like stomach trouble. Still, the fact that it even existed tells you how creatively gross some of these remedies could be. Sticky, pungent, and sacred, it played double duty as a spiritual offering and a dental antiseptic. Chew it for its cleansing power, burn it to please the gods. Multitasking at its finest. It's alkaline, abrasive, and shockingly effective at removing plaque. Other ingredients might include burnt eggshells for calcium or salt for antiseptic action. And sometimes brace yourself against crushed mouse bones. Yep, you heard right. The priest might recite a verse from the Book of Remedies, or whisper your name into the mixture before applying it to your gums. The idea? Naming your pain disarms it. It's not what you wanted to hear. See, in Egyptian medical thinking, pain had a spiritual cause. This is where we start to see the strange intersection of chemistry and belief. Some of their methods, oddly enough, worked. Now, don't panic. And then, of course, we come to the infamous crocodile dung. It's the ancient Egyptian toothpaste ingredient that's launched 1,000 cringes. Historians still argue whether this was common practice or a rare ritual act. Now, before you spiral into horror, let's take a moment to appreciate the context. They didn't have lab coats or FDA regulations. Still, not everything was so unsavory. Honey, for example, was a frequent ingredient in both medicine and hygiene. Some combinations aimed not just to clean, but to refresh. And let's not forget myrrh. But it wasn't all ingredients and chance. There was technique too. A priest or healer might direct you to sit facing east, toward the rising sun, during your cleansing. The act might involve slow circular rubbing motions with a frayed stick, followed by a rinse of warm natron water. And that bronze tool, probably a scraper, and if something was really wrong, like a cavity or swelling, they might heat herbs and apply them to the area. Still, all of this was done with care, reverence even. So there you are, sitting in the shade, mouth slightly numb from some chalky concoction, and the priest nods approvingly. Your breath smells faintly of smoke and spice. Your teeth feel oddly smooth, and you can't help but wonder, could crocodile dung actually have worked? Let's not test it. But it makes you think. You walk slowly now, your teeth still tingling from the strange, gritty paste. And as you pass through a narrow alley lined with limestone homes, you catch a glimpse of something familiar and surprisingly modern. It's frayed at one end, like a miniature paintbrush. She doesn't look rushed. No plastic, no nylon, no power button. Just a stick, some teeth, and a little persistence. Oral care wasn't just for elite sit. It was part of daily ritual. In a land where appearance mattered deeply and cleanliness was sacred, brushing your teeth was just as important as bathing or applying eyeliner. In fact, there's a kind of meditative rhythm to it, like she's brushing away more than just plaque, maybe the dust of the day, or the quiet dread of another night's dreams. Egyptians often selected aromatic woods for their stick's knot, just for effectiveness, but for taste and fragrance. The powder might be made from pumice, ash, or ground seashells mixed with salt and herbs. You dip your damp finger in the jar, rub it along your gums first, a quick rinse. Then he grabs a chewed stick, rubs it in powder, and begins scrubbing with short, circular motions. He leans forward slightly, so the drips fall onto the sand, and once finished, he rinses again, swishing and spitting neatly. And teeth, then rinse with warm water, or if you were fancy, with a floral infusion. Bay laurel, cinnamon, acacia each had its own personality. It's like choosing between peppermint and spearmint today. A woman is sitting by a doorway, holding a thin twig between her fingers. She's chewing it softly, methodically. A golden pick wasn't necessarily functional, but it did make a statement. There's no direct evidence for this, but you like the image. Dim lamplight, a mother correcting her son's brushing motion, a grandmother humming a hymn while polishing her molars. Yes, I care about my smile. And yes, it costs more than your boat. Others looking at the frayed end and the hand motion say that's brushing, plain and simple. As with much in ancient history, the truth is probably somewhere in between. The columns are carved with rows of lotus blossoms, and you notice something odd. A carving of a man holding what looks suspiciously like a toothbrush. Is it symbolic? Is it real? Here, it's simply known as a chewing stick. Was it sticky? Yes, but fragrant and likely antimicrobial. And Bluetooth speakers, how deeply ancient people connected with their bodies through routines like this. Each stroke of the chew stick was a moment of care, a tactile meditation. You didn't brush while checking emails. You didn't rinse between texts. You were present. Your voice emerged from that dark cavern. Your soul exited through it at death. It needed to be clean. It also made your breath smell like the inside of a temple incense burner, which, for Egyptians, was probably the point. Maybe the tools have changed. But the need, the instinct, the simple desire to begin the day with a cleaner mouth, like a ritual, like a prayer. The Egyptians didn't invent it. It likely originated farther east, but they adopted it early, and they made it their own. She's using a miswak. Well, that's what it would be called centuries later across the Islamic world. Frayed twigs were the toothbrushes of the ancient world. Some had little ivory spatulas, likely used for scooping out powder. Oh. You get the sense that someone loved their dental set the way modern influencers love their skincare fridges. And here's the wild thing. They worked. Modern studies have shown that twigs from certain trees, especially Salvadora persicont, contain natural antiseptics, stringents, even mild fluoride-like compounds. They clean teeth gently and promote gum health. If your electric toothbrush ever gives up on you, maybe grab a branch and give it a go. He's got a basket of fish slung over one shoulder and a chunk of unleavened bread in the other hand. Even he knows that if you're going to chew river perch bones later, you'd better prepare your enamel now. Just maybe rinse it first. The woman you're watching probably uses the stick every morning and evening, maybe even after meals. You turn the corner and spot a boy doing the same thing, chewing and brushing with focus. This is where we begin to understand how deeply oral hygiene was woven into the rhythms of Egyptian life. While you may think of toothbrushes as a relatively recent invention, there's evidence that chew sticks were widespread as early as 3000 BCE. Some people preferred powdered alternatives. Tooth powder, or dashirat, was often kept in small ceramic jars, capped with linen or wax. One such powder was reportedly composed of burnt frankincense, ground into a fine dust and blended with honey.
Back to technique.
You watch as a man kneels before a bowl of water, dips his fingers into a small clay pot, and begins the morning routine. He does this without looking into a mirror there weren't many end, yet he moves with the precision of someone who's done it hundreds of times. It's easy to forget in the dim hum of a modern bathroom, with its LED lights and sometimes even stylish. Archaeologists have found small cosmetic cases in elite tombs. decorated with miniature tools, tweezers, eyeliner sticks, and yes, tiny brushes or sticks for the teeth. Among the wealthiest, gold toothpicks have been discovered, symbols of vanity or maybe just dental necessity. Some fringe historians argue that the popularity of these tools suggests communal brushing families gathering around in the evening, cleaning teeth together like some sort of domestic purification. You stop walking and glance up toward a temple gate. Historians still argue whether these depictions were literal or allegorical. Some believe the items in hand are ritual tools or writing implements, but whether it was about technique, tool, or temple etiquette, one thing is clear: ancient Egyptians cared perhaps more than most about the mouth, not just because it was the opening for food, but because it was the instrument of prayer, speech, song, and spell. And somehow, walking among these ordinary scenesmen, brushing with twigs, women swishing with mint water, you feel an odd kinship. That part never left us. The sun has climbed higher in the Egyptian sky now, spilling warm light over the mud brick homes and market stalls as you continue your slow stroll through this ancient, curiously minty world. You're about to enter the realm of mouthwash. You pass by a man grinding something with a stone pestle, his movements rhythmic, steady. The smell hits you next, a sharp, salty tang mixed with something sweet and smoky. It didn't just neutralize odors, killed bacteria, reduced inflammation, and stripped away residue from that ever-present gritty bread. Was it pleasant? Not exactly. Imagine rinsing with salty soap water while staring at a statue of Anubis. But it got the job done. This chalky white mineral was a natural mix of baking soda and salt found in dried lake beds. Why the effort? It was stirred into a copper bowl, left to settle, and then carefully poured into smaller clay cups for personal use. In harmony mott, the principle of cosmic order, even your body odor had to play by the rules. Bad breath wasn't just unpleasant. It was considered a sign of disorder, disease, or even spiritual impurity. And the food piled high-roasted goose, figs, honey cakes. You lean in to whisper a witty comment to your neighbor and suddenly realize you forgot to rinse. You couldn't very well chant hymns to Isis, or whisper a love poem to your crush if your breath smelled like fermented goat cheese. A bit ceremonial, a bit medicinal, and a bit like swishing with ancient Listerine. Egyptians used it for mummification, hand-washing, household cleaning, and you guessed it, toral rinses. And while we're fairly certain that's poetic license, it tells you something. Clean breath was part of beauty. Attendants may have prepared special rinses tailored to the pharaoh's preferences. One preserved record from the court of Amenhotep. The third suggests that his attendants used a rinse of cedar oil and white salt, sweetened with honey and stirred before sunrise. Whatever he's making, it's going in someone's mouth. She covers her mouth with one hand as if modesty extends to oral hygiene. The opening of the mouth ceremony, meant to restore speech in the afterlife, was as much about spiritual cleanliness as it was symbolic resurrection. Imagine crossing into eternity with unbrushed teeth. No, thank you. Before feasts. After meals. Left to ferment slightly, it was believed to soften hard gums and calm the fire of the tongue. Here and there, people gargle in the quiet communal rhythm of evening. Not loudly, not hurriedly. It's part of the closing ceremony of the day, like brushing before bed, whispering a final prayer. Modern researchers have tried recreating it. The results: fermented milk pudding. But then again, Maybe we're the odd ones, using foaming gels and artificial sweeteners in neon colors. One historian described the taste as what regret would taste like if regret had a dairy farm. Was it vanity? Medicine?
Logic.
Lemon oil? When available, offered acid and fragrance? Crushed fennel seeds fought bad breath. Ground lotus petals, for those feeling romantic, left a sweet floral trace behind. And of course, honey was the cure, antibacterial, soothing, and a perfect excuse to turn mouth care into dessert. Historians still argue whether it's real or just tomb painting exaggeration. You hope it's real, though, because let's be honest, who wouldn't want to gargle like Cleopatra? Before visiting the temple, even before sleep, she spits discreetly into the sand and dabs her lips with linen. Then she smiles, softly, politely, and without fear of offending the gods or her neighbors. Others used sweet wine or milk with a few drops of frankincense oil. A few texts describe more curious ingredients like ground copper shavings or even traces of silver. Scholars still argue whether these were for medicinal or symbolic purposes. One theory suggests that silver, considered a purifier, might have been added for spiritual mouth cleansing, not unlike using holy water for a blessing. This, you realize, is where things get interesting. Now, don't expect a bright blue bottle labeled Ultra Fresh 3000, no bubbles, a plastic cap with a measuring line. But the concept, the goal, the awkward swishing and spitting, yep, it's all here. Egyptians had mouth rinses, and like many of their dental inventions, some were surprisingly effective, while others, well, you'd have to be very desperate. The most common ingredient was natron, Egypt's goat, too, for all things cleaning, preserving, and spiritually purifying. When dissolved in water and mixed with a few herbs or oils, natron could create a powerful alkaline rinse. One recipe mentions a mixture of natron, crushed mint, myrrh resin, and a splash of palm wine. You spot a woman nearby leaning over a jar, gargling quietly. Now you might be wondering, why the fuss? Well, it turns out that a clean mouth was in tea. Just a matter of comfort or health in Egypt, it could shape your destiny. For starters, good breath was socially important. In a society obsessed with balance, there are recorded love poems from the New Kingdom where the lover praises the scent of their beloved's mouth, comparing it to the perfume of lotus and crushed pomegranate. Now imagine you're a noble at a banquet. The room is filled with music, the air thick with perfume. Not a good look. So, rinsing became part of the ritual. And just like the toothpaste formulas, the rinse ingredients varied. Some added crushed herbs, basil, thyme, or coriander. But there's a fringe belief offered by a few papyrologists who've spent perhaps too much time squinting at faded ink under lamps that some elite Egyptians gargled with rosewater steeped in honey and crushed pearls. Speaking of which, royal dental care was an entirely separate level of fancy. Pharaohs had attendants for everything: bathing, dressing, feeding, and yes, brushing. We don't know if he enjoyed the flavor. But if you're Amenhotep, you probably don't complain. Even embalming rituals included mouth care. As the body was prepared for burial, the mouth was washed and perfumed, and then there were the experimental types. In some medical papyri, you find one bizarre recipe: a mouth rinse made from mashed dates, boiled barley, and goat's milk. Still, some ingredients made sense. You find yourself chuckling softly at the thought of someone in 1300 BCE rinsing with barley pudding and thinking. As the sun begins to sink over the distant palms, the rinsing continues, and somewhere a small jar is sealed and placed beside a bedroll. Just another night in Egypt. just another dream, beginning with a clean mouth. The night settles in slow and warm, wrapping the city in quiet shadows and softened torchlight. You find yourself drawn now toward the wealthier district, a place of smooth stone columns, rooftop gardens, and painted shutters. And in that skull, nestled into a jawbone long since dried, are 12 gold teeth. Here, you're about to meet someone whose teeth, oddly enough, have made him famous. His name is lost to time, but his skull remains, safely housed in a museum thousands of years and several continents away, and gleaming with the soft shimmer of wealth and, let's be honest, a little bit of vanity. Imagine him now, a mid-level scribe or high-ranking temple official, flashing his gilded molars at formal dinners like someone showing off a new chariot. Mummies have been found with carefully wrapped jaws, linen stuffed gently into cheek cavities, or even false teeth carved from ivory or wood. These weren't just for show, they were spiritual prosthetics. In the other, a pick shaped like an ibis's beak. Dental care for him is a full production, because in the upper class, everything was performance, even your hygiene. In the afterlife, your body was meant to be whole. In other words, no singing for the gods until you've brushed. The body was seen as a reflection of spiritual order, and to neglect it was to invite chaos. In temple life, purity mattered. Priests were expected to bathe multiple times a day. They shaved their entire bodies. They wore only linen. And yes, they maintained strict oral hygiene. Think of it like divine grooming. Clean yourself not just to look good, but to stay in cosmic alignment. So if your molars had given up somewhere around age 40, the embalmers made sure they'd be good as new for the next world. Which means your ancient gold-toothed bachelor wasn't just grooming for spiritual reasons. He was hoping someone would notice and swoon. While we don't have a papyrus saying, "Thou shalt not approach the altar with fish mouth," the implications are clear. A few extreme examples suggest experimentation. Gold wire used to bind loose teeth together, or animal sinews stitched around molars to hold them in place. Cleanliness of speech, both literal and metaphorical, was sacred. Inside, wrapped in layers of careful linen, lies another Egyptian who believed that a clean mouth mattered, even in death. Yes. 12. Its label faint, but legible, translates loosely too. For the tongue against the fire, a mouth salve. Maybe made of honey and fig or resin and mint. You wonder, did he laugh more often, knowing his smile sparkled like sunlight on the Nile? Did people trust him more? Did he, perhaps, invent the first ever smile to impress? Whatever it was, someone packed it lovingly for use in the afterlife. Historians still argue whether these gold additions were intended to replace damaged teeth, strengthen remaining ones, or simply show off. Either way, it's clear this man wanted to leave behind more than just a name. He wanted his smile to survive eternity. Not gold fillings, not grills in the modern sense. These were small inserts, likely hammered into place. Was it decorative? Probably. Is it functional? Debatable. Clean teeth, clean soul. Egyptian burial practices often reflected what people valued most in life, and for some, that included their teeth. And it wasn't just the rich. A laborer buried with a palm fiber chew stick beside him sends the same message. Take care of my mouth, even in death. But let's go back to our gold-toothed friend. You picture him rising early, perhaps before dawn. He dips a linen cloth into rose-scented water and rubs gently at the gum line. His servant offers a rinse made of natron and mint. Then, perhaps using a tool made of copper or carved bone, he checks for any buildup around those precious teeth. In one hand he holds a small bronze mirror, polished to a warm glow. Among Egypt's elite oral care wasn't just about comfort, it was about control. You may chuckle now, imagining a temple scribe frantically flossing before writing prayers to Ra, but that's not far off. One inscription from the Karnak temple complex refers to a ritual cleansing of the teeth before the first song. Among the clergy, bad breath could actually disqualify you from certain duties. And then there's love. Egyptian poetry is filled with references to the mouth knot, just as a source of speech, but as a symbol of desire. One love song reads, "Your lips are lotus petals, your breath the breeze over sweet wine, charming, slightly alcoholic, but telling." Good breath was not just attractive, it was intoxicating. Of course, not every dental oddity was gilded and romantic. Some remains show signs of crude dental procedures, drilled holes in molars, filed down canines, even entire rows of teeth removed, possibly post-mortem, possibly as a form of painful treatment. Historians still argue whether these were medical innovations or desperate hacks, but one thing is certain: they cared. Deeply enough to take risks, enough to try. And now, under the starlight, you pass another home, this one quieter. A tomb, perhaps half carved into the earth. Nearby is a tiny vessel, the size of a thumb, sealed with wax. Imagine them waking up in the next world, yawning quietly, stretching and reaching first thing for that little jar. Routine even beyond the grave. And as you walk back toward the present, your mind drifts again to that man with 12 gold teeth. We'll never know for sure. But tonight, as you prepare to drift off, you can be certain of this. People have always cared about how they greet the world with their words, their breath, their smile, sometimes with a little extra gold. The Nile is whispering again tonight. You hear it behind the rustling reeds and feel it in the air, thick with river mist and the faint perfume of night-blooming jasmine. You're further from the bustling city now, nearer to the rural edges where people sleep earlier, rise with the sun, and make their own medicine with what they have on hand. Her hands move patiently, rhythmically, as if performing a ritual as old as the soil beneath her feet. And the woman is a master of it. You lean a little closer and peek inside the bowl. There, glimmering in the moonlight, is a curious mixture of white powder and ash. And here, in the hush of these simpler homes, the story of Toothpaste takes another unexpected turn. You arrive at a reed-thatched hut, where a young woman is crouched beside a clay mixing bowl, methodically grinding something with a smooth river stone. A base of powdered ash, likely from burnt bread or wood, gives the paste its grit. Tomorrow morning, her entire family will use it. A dab on the finger, scrub of the molars, rinse with cool river water. Crushed rock salt adds abrasiveness and preservation. She has dropped in a pinch of dried mint leaves and maybe a splash of vinegar or fig juice to bind it. This is an early form of DIY toothpaste. Dated roughly 4th century CE, contained what many believe to be the world's oldest written toothpaste recipe. But swish them around your mouth and you'll start to wonder whether the ancient Egyptians weren't just brushing, but also training themselves for battle. The toothpaste bites back. Ingredients aren't listed in any scrolls, but they follow the same principles practiced for centuries. When she's done, she scoops it into a small ceramic pot, seals it with waxed cloth, and sets it beside a bundle of chew sticks. In fact, it was deemed more effective than some commercial toothpastes in reducing plaque and promoting gum health. There's just one issue: it burns. It's humble. Sure, but it works. And now, a strange fact floats to the surface of your mind, something archaeologists uncovered not long ago. A scroll from the Greco-Roman period of Egyptian history. Some suggest that white teeth were seen as a sign of favor from the gods. Others say it was simply about practicality. After all, a cleaner mouth meant fewer infections, less pain, and a better chance of surviving to see your grandchildren. Speech was power. Prayers were breath made holy. Spells, oaths, marriage vows, they all emerged from between the teeth. So keeping the mouth clean wasn't just hygiene, it was protection, it was magic, it read more or less. Some were meant to preserve the sweetness of the voice. They're people of rhythm. How many small acts like brushing teeth with crushed iris flower carried more intelligence than we ever gave them credit for. Of memory. Scholars believe it once held a chant a bedtime spell for children men, to keep the biting spirits from entering through the mouth during dreams, of deep inherited wisdom. Others were believed to protect the wearer from the silence that falls with pain, a poetic way of describing a toothache, perhaps. 1 drachma of rock salt, 2 of mint, 1 of dried iris flower, and 20 grains of pepper crush into a fine powder and mix. Sounds simple, right? But here's the catch. When recreated by modern scientists, this ancient toothpaste worked remarkably well. They watched teeth fall out with age, saw the pain that came from rotting gums, and understood that something small and sharp could unmake even the strongest body. She catches your glance, nods politely, and continues tending to her garden of herbs. Dill, coriander, papyrus reed, and something sharp-scented you can't name. Pepper, salt, crushed flowers. All very antibacterial, sure. Still, the formula's effectiveness isn't accidental. It reflects a long tradition of herbal experimentation and local knowledge passed down across generations. In the rural villages, tooth powders might include ground pumice stone for whitening. She hums as she works, a little off-key lullaby passed down from her grandmother. There's no rush, just circular motions. A gentle spit, a rinse from a gourd, charcoal from acacia wood for detoxifying, crushed oyster shells for mineral content, burned eggshells for calcium, with a pinch of salt to preserve it. Historians still argue whether these powders were primarily cosmetic or genuinely medicinal. But in Egypt, nothing was ever just practical. The symbolism of the mouth ran deep. Even amulets reflected this. Small charms in the shape of tongues or open mouths were worn around the neck, often made of carnelian or faience. You pass a woman wearing one now, tiny pendant shaped like a tongue, glowing softly against her linen tunic. And nearby, her daughter is brushing her teeth. She's crouched beside a shallow bowl, dipping a chewed twig into the ash paste. Then, a curious thing, the girl places the twig upright in a tiny jar filled with oil to preserve it. Ready it for tomorrow. These aren't poor people. It makes you wonder, how much of what we know about health was forgotten, only to be rediscovered millennia later? Not far from this scene, you find a clay tablet etched with tiny marks, its inscription worn by wind and time. Dental ghost story. Comforting, somehow. The Egyptians knew, in their own poetic way, that the mouth was a place of vulnerability. And so they cared. They rinsed. They brushed. And now you walk on, soft-footed, beneath the stars. Your mouth suddenly aware of itself, of your tongue resting behind your teeth, of the cool air that slips between molars, of the strange ancient urge to keep that place clean and safe? Because even now, after thousands of years and oceans of change, it still matters. You wake slowly to a golden haze warming the reeds and stone around you. Morning in Egypt arrives without hurry, though, kind of light that stretches across the earth like a sigh. The house of life was part library, part clinic, part mystery. A building attached to temples where the learned few scribes, priests, and physicians gathered to study medicine, magic, mathematics, and everything in between. The air is thick with resin smoke and the musty perfume of old ink. Over 100 pages long, dated to around 1550 BCE, and filled with hundreds of remedies, incantations, prescriptions including several devoted to tooth pain. Two figures are seated cross-legged at the far end, murmuring over an open papyrus and gesturing to a diagram of a jaw. Not bones exactly, symbolic images, lines, dots, tooth-shaped icons, instructional, mystical, here, in these halls of quiet footsteps and burning incense. You begin to understand just how seriously ancient Egyptians took the craft of healing. And today, as the city stirs, you turn your steps toward a place both sacred and silent, the House of Life. The writing is tiny, neat, rhythmic. You hear the words being read aloud. No, not a temple, not exactly a school either, or lull it to sleep. Historians still argue whether this was metaphorical language or a literal belief in a parasite. Does it help? Maybe. Does it smell like a soup gone wrong? Almost certainly. But either way, the pain was real and the desperation to fix it even more so. And they devised remedies to fight it. And yes, healing teeth was part of it. You duck beneath a lintel inscribed with delicate hieroglyphs and step into a shaded corridor lined with papyrus scrolls. You recognize the text. It's part of the Ebers Papyrus, one of the most famous medical scrolls in the world. You inch closer. To drive out the worm from the tooth apply, crushed sycamore, beer froth, and ochre. The treatment? Smear the gums with black ink made of charred dates and recite a spell to silence it. Wait, a worm? Yes. Welcome to one of the oldest and most enduring dental theories in history. The tooth worm. They treated the body as both physical and symbolic a landscape to be soothed and decoded. It was a message, a flame, a whisper, a warning. Healing required listening and responding with both hands, one for medicine, one for meaning. The idea was simple and horrifying. Not just on the tooth worm or donkey milk, but on the quiet determination of people long gone who looked pain in the mouth and said, "We'll fix this." Did they work? Did they do nothing? Did people believe because it was all they had adored, because belief itself was part of the cure? Some solutions were brilliant. Others were bizarre. But all were rooted in Corinne, the fundamental belief that the mouth mattered, and that it deserved attention, ritual, and respect. Offerings have been left at their feet, small copper mirrors, combs, and even toothpicks carved from ivory. A whispered prayer drifts through the air. May she calm the fire in my mouth. Toothaches were thought to be caused by a tiny creature burrowing into your tooth, gnawing from the inside. You couldn't see it, but you could feel it when pain flared. That was the worm thrashing. When it stopped, the worm was asleep. It wasn't just an Egyptian theory. Versions of it existed in Mesopotamia, India, even in medieval Europe. But the Egyptians wrote it down early and clearly. One such remedy involved heating certain resins or herbs and applying the paste directly to the affected tooth. The goal? Smoke the worm out or poison it. Another remedy in the papyrus includes applying goose fat mixed with cumin to the jawline. You keep moving, passing shelves of palm-sized medicine jars labeled with ochre ink. The ingredients? A wild mix, powdered lapis lazuli, sacred, calming, anti-inflammatory, crushed garlic, pungent, antibacterial, frankincense ash, spiritual, and possibly antiseptic, donkey milk, because why not? Then you spot something truly odd. A scroll describing how to treat a tooth that speaks ill. What? Well, scholars believe it was a poetic way of saying that a tooth was infected or rotten, causing bad breath or pain. What? Is this medicine or metaphor? Both, probably. Egyptian healing didn't draw hard lines between science and sorcery. In one corner of the room, a low shelf holds statuettes of Sekhmet, lion-headed goddess of war and healing. And that's the thing you realize now, walking these echoing halls, that for Egyptians, pain wasn't just a nuisance. As you exit the house of life, blinking against the sudden brightness, you wonder how many of these tooth remedies were ever actually tested. Historians still argue whether the papyri were manuals or rituals, but they remain copied, buried, rediscovered decos of a people who refused to suffer in silence. You walk a little slower now, reflecting, and they tried. They tried with crushed gems and temple chants, with beer, foam, and mint and burnt bones, even if it meant fighting invisible worms. You walk now along the edge of the necropolis, the city of the dead. Here the hush deepens, the sand softens. The tombs rise like forgotten dreams, sealed in limestone and myth. And yet, despite the solemnity of this place, there's an odd comfort in how much life still clings to these walls. The carvings on the lintel speak not of battles or gods, but of a man's daily duties. He who tended the storehouses, he who baked the sacred bread, he who spoke softly. Its lid is shaped like a lion's head, mouth open, teeth bared. Inside, traces of powder minty, chalky, still faintly fragrant after thousands of years. Tooth powder for the afterlife. Life in the form of stories, and yes, dental ones too. 'Cause even in death, the Egyptians cared about teeth. You approach a small tomb cut into the hillside, its entrance guarded by two crumbling statues. You wonder, was that last part a euphemism for diplomacy? Or did he just have unusually pleasant breath, but still full of action, eating, speaking, laughing, singing? Others insist it's a visual pun, representing real dental aid. Inside, nestled beside the sarcophagus, you see a small clay jar among the lotus flowers and baskets of bread. Is a scene that catches you off guard. A man holding his jaw in pain, being tended to by what looks like a priest. Pain was acknowledged. Relief was depicted. Well, in healing, however it came, was considered sacred. Above them, a hieroglyph reads something like, "The comfort of the gums, but rarely their own." We find their voices not in biographies, but in items left behind. It's a quiet reminder that oral hygiene wasn't merely about surviving day to day. It was about preparing for the forever. Or pack in a herbal salve, a primitive dental instrument. It belonged to a scribe named Meru, whose name was etched into the handle. Servant of words. In Egyptian belief, the afterlife wasn't an abstract paradise. It was a physical continuation of life on earth, only better, more fragrant, more serene. Some believe they were used to clean the mouths of infants' soft bristles, gentle curves carved with care. The echo of 1,000 small daily acts of care behind you, gritty, fragrant, stubbornly human, still here. You never know who you'll need to smile at next, still yours. Others say they were ritual items, symbolic of speech, purity, and healing. Maybe a healer, maybe a patient, maybe a child afraid of the dark. The vines could mean healing, or regrowth, or just hope. Perhaps both. To do any of that, you'd need teeth. So they sent the dead with the tools to maintain their smile. You stoop, brush away the dust, and find what looks like a pendant, circular, bronze, worn thin. At its center, a tiny engraving of a tooth wrapped with vines. Not just the elite. Even humble tombs have yielded toothpicks, chew sticks, and jars of cleansing powder tucked among the linens. A soft toothbrush carved from palm wood was found in a woman's burial chamber. She died in her 30s. Someone loved her enough to ensure she'd wake in the next world with clean breath.
Ow.
No inscription, just a warm smoothness shaped by time and touch. It wasn't superstition. It was continuity. Who carried their dental routines into the grave, not out of fear, but of faith. Faith in waking up somewhere else and needing to smile. You move further into the tomb and gaze at the wall paintings. Now scholars debate this. Some say it's just metaphorical relief from emotional suffering. Historians still argue whether this is the first depiction of dentistry in human history. Regardless, it speaks volumes. Back in the daylight now, you walk among the scribes' tombs. These men and women recorded the lives of others, one such item. A bronze dental probe, short, hooked, delicate. It could be used to remove food debris, clean abscesses, and what are words if not things shaped by teeth? Nearby, a set of small ivory tools was found in the tomb of a royal nurse. Egypt rarely separates the practical from the spiritual. A stick for brushing could also be a wand for blessing. A rinse could be both medicine and offering. As you move toward a larger tomb, shaded by palm trees, you catch a glimpse of something glinting in the sand. You imagine someone wearing it. You turn it over, and for a moment you feel the weight of it, all the generations who brushed before sunrise, who rinsed with salt and wine, who whispered prayers against pain. The necropolis fades behind you now, replaced by soft dunes and the distant call of birds. You feel the sand in your sandals, the sun on your back. You touch your teeth gently with your tongue. And somewhere in the wind, the past whispers back. Keep them clean. You never know who you'll need to smile at next. You make your way now along a narrow path that hugs the Nile, where the light dances on the water like shattered gold. A breeze carries the smell of clay and damp rushes. In the distance, the city hums with the soft rhythm of another ordinary day market's clattering. Bakers singing, scribes scratching away at scrolls. But today, you've got something more peculiar in mind. Dental fashion. Yes, as strange as it sounds, there were times, especially among the elite, when teeth weren't just functional chewing tools. Theories abound. Some believe these were therapeutic, intended to plug holes or reinforce worn enamel. Others see it as a dental version of eyeliner or jewelry meant to impress, surprise, or dazzle in candlelight. They were statements, symbols, tiny banners of status, power, even flirtation. Let's start with something rare but confirmed. Tooth inlays. Scholars believe some ancient Egyptians may have tinted their teeth for aesthetic reasons, particularly during festive rituals. Blackened teeth, achieved with herbal pastes and dyes, may have been seen as elegant, especially when contrasted with bright eyes and jewelry.
In a few burials,
Archaeologists have found evidence of decorative, teeny bits of precious metal or stones inserted into the teeth. Historians still argue whether these inlays were placed during life or after death. But either way, they represent an ancient desire to make the mouth exquisite. Imagine flashing a smile at court and catching the torchlight just right so your molar gleams like a sapphire, subtle, mysterious, slightly impractical. And then there's color. You pass a mural on a garden wall. A woman with elaborate braids and a knowing smile, her teeth oddly dark. Before you laugh, remember, cultures have painted teeth red, gold, even blue. A rinse cup painted with scenes from a favorite myth. These weren't just practical, they were personal. Among the oils and perfumes, he offers bundles of mint sprigs, jars of salt paste, and carved sticks for brushing. He beckons you closer, holding out a chew stick that's been dyed a faint blue. Good for the breath, he says, tapping his tongue with a wink. And for luck, we just happen to favor white. Beauty, like toothpaste, evolves. Sure, these dental ashabdis, as scholars now call them, weren't widespread, but when found, they stood beside models of bakers, brewers, and scribes. Proof that even in the next world, someone had to care for your smile. But also tradition, color, and ritual went hand in hand. Among wealthier households, you'd also find oral care kits tucked into baskets near grooming tools. A carved ivory case might hold a copper toothpick, a small jar of powdered natron. These silent fasts, lasting several hours or even days, were believed to preserve the sacredness of the voice. Now imagine how much you'd want that word to smell nice. During this time, practitioners might also cleanse their mouths with special rinses infused with lotus, salt, and cedar oil to ensure that when they did speak again, their words were clean. In temple schools, novice scribes were instructed in cleanliness, personal and spiritual. Some schools had daily routines that included hand washing, foot washing, and toothbrushing before morning lessons. You recognize it as a cleansing mix: charred fennel, myrrh, and vinegar. Not tasty, but purifying. Marks him as someone preparing for ritual, someone who takes the sanctity of the mouth seriously. Use it to greet, to eat, to kiss, to pray. Sacred, deserving of a little shimmer in the sunlight. We speak our truths and our lies with it, nourish ourselves, defend ourselves, and express our joy through laughter. They invented the idea that your mouth was worthy of attention, a flat stone for mixing pastes, and a fragment of linen used as floss. One noblewoman's tomb even contained a gold-handled tongue scraper engraved with lotus petals. It was more than a tool, it was a work of art, a student's revenge, preserved forever in faded ink. But even among commoners, dental tools had flair. A chew stick with a knotted handle, polished by years of use. You pause beside a merchant selling grooming goods. His stall smells of sandalwood and myrrh. It's like modern jingles reminding you to brush for 2 minutes, only with more rhymes about tooth loss and chewing sticks. Was it marketing? And here's another curious detail. Some high-status Egyptians were buried with small statues representing dentists. You walk a little further and overhear a group of children singing a skipping rhyme. It's silly and oddly specific, Chew your stick before the sun, or your teeth will all be gone. If your gums begin to bleed, use the powder, not the seed. It's catchy, sure. It's also a form of oral hygiene. Education passed down not by papyrus, but by play. Egyptians knew how to teach through repetition. There's even a charming record of a young scribe complaining that his teacher smelled of onions and had no brush of his own. But perhaps the most unexpected form of dental fashion was silence. In certain rituals, especially those dedicated to Osiris or Thoth, participants were required to fast from speaking. Imagine treating your first word after silence like a sacred unveiling. And then, just as you turn to leave, a priest walks by, his mouth stained faintly with black powder. You follow his path for a while, letting your thoughts drift. Because what is more intimate, more human than the mouth? So of course they dressed it up, cleaned it out, guarded it with gold and herbs and silent rituals. You realize now? The ancient Egyptians didn't just invent toothpaste. That it was beautiful, sacred, deserving of a little shimmer in the sunlight. Evening settles over the city like a soft blanket woven from the Nile's mist and temple smoke. The streets begin to quiet, but not entirely. The scent of bread still lingers, and somewhere nearby someone hums a lullaby, rhythmic, ancient. But there's one place you haven't visited yet, one place where the line between medicine, magic, and daily routine vanishes completely. The temple apothecary. Spices, herbs, and pungent oils spill from open amphorae. The air is head equal parts healing and mystery. You've wandered far today. From gardens to tombs, from papyrus scrolls to chew sticks dipped in fig juice. Tucked behind thick walls of sun-bleached stone, this sacred pharmacy isn't marked by signs or symbols. Instead, you find it by following your nose. The oils are prescribed for a dozen ailments, but especially for the burning mouth, a common phrase used in scrolls to describe gum disease, ulcers, or simply a bad case of morning breath. Inside, 2 temple attendants are preparing the evening batch of mouth oils. You watch as one crushes myrrh with a bronze pestle. The other stirs a thick golden liquid in a stone bowl, adding just a thread of cinnamon bark and dried mint. Sounds scientific, maybe not, but strangely beautiful. Absolutely. You lean closer and glimpse the ingredients for a particularly revered blend. These aren't perfumes. They're medicinal rinses, known as ricket in ricket, knowledge of the little people. It's poetic. It's an oddly democratic. Anyone might use them. She closes her eyes. Her shoulders loosen. There is a peace in her face that makes you wonder how much of wellness is ritual. A priest explains they're infused waters prepared under moonlight, sometimes soaked with silver coins or river reeds blessed during the festival of Opet, the temple's chief perfumer or healer. Depending on the day, pulls out a tightly rolled scroll, talismans, and yet none of them come with a chant. None of them are made under the full moon. None of them, let's be honest, smell like crushed sycamore fruit and optimism. She gently seats him, offers him a rinse, and prepares a poultice of pounded garlic, barley mash, and honey. The smell is aggressive. Placebos. The answer may be yes to all 3. Crushed sycamore fruit, drops of date wine, powdered malachite, a whisper of frankincense smoke caught on linen. His fingers unclench. The atmosphere is slow, sleepy. Someone lights a lamp scented with crushed rose and juniper. You realize it's nearly bedtime for the entire temple. This symbolic act, performed at dusk, is meant to wash away the lies of the day. Historians still argue whether this was purely ceremonial or thought to activate the ingredients chemically, but the result is the same. Medicine made with reverence, in observation, in blending comfort with care, soothing the body while speaking to the soul. You spit gently into the basin and watch it ripple, then vanish. This last one is inhaled while swishing, the belief being that breath carries spirit and spirit heals the flesh. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked well enough to be used for centuries. Patron of scribes and, curiously, of correct speech. One line reads, and here's where it gets even more fascinating. Every batch of mouth rinse is sung into harmony. They wanted to speak clearly, love fully, and taste the next world with a mouth that still remembered honey and mint. Literally. Before being sealed, a temple scribe chants specific tones, elongated vowels. Steady breaths meant to bind the forces of healing to the blend. You sit cross-legged now, near the door, as an apprentice brushes her teeth with a soft twig dipped in the warm rinse. Further along the shelf, you see something unusual. A series of tiny vials labeled with symbols you don't recognize. Were they mouthwashes? You think back to modern products now, tubes with claims of whitening power, cavity defense, or freshness technology. You smile because part of you wishes they did. And while you're musing, a temple boy dashes in, holding his jaw, eyes wide with panic. The head perfumer doesn't flinch. She places it against the side of his face and begins humming. I'll spell exactly, but something close. The boy calms. He breathes slowly. Later you learn this was the most common treatment for a tooth abscess. Warmth, sweetness, something to draw out the pain. And this is where the ancient Egyptian magic truly lies, not in mystery, but in method. You glance at a set of small tablets near the corner, etched with prayers to Thoth, the god of wisdom. Let my mouth be true, my breath sweet, my tongue sharp only with truth. Even the gods had standards for oral hygiene. The attendants now begin cleaning the day's tools, boiling the bronze, rinsing the bowls, sweeping herbs into neat piles. But not before the night dose. Each initiate is given a final rinse, a mouthful of warm mint infusion swirled 3 times and spit into a sacred basin shaped like a lioness head. You're offered a ladle, and so you rinse. The warmth is surprising. It's the flavor, sharp but soft. And for a moment, just a moment, you feel part of something old. Something calm, something clean. Because the ancient Egyptians didn't just want to die with their teeth intact. They wanted to speak clearly, love fully, and taste the next world with a mouth that still remembered honey and mint. Darkness has deepened now. The Nile is nearly invisible, just a ribbon of ink stitched into the land. The walls are thick with the smell of herbs, body oil, and pain. Inside, a man groans softly. His hands are clenched. His jaw is swollen. No antibiotics, no anesthesia, just hands, knowledge, and whatever tools they could muster. But the stars they blaze, not scattered randomly, but placed as if by design. One is badly infected, pushing against the gum like an angry seed. His face is flushed with fever. His family has brought him here as a last resort. Ancient Egyptians believed the heavens mirrored life on earth, and tonight, under their gaze, you follow a final thread in the story of ancient dental care. What happens when it all went wrong? You re-entering a place few willingly visited in their time, the healer's hut on the edge of the workman's village at Deir el Medina. It's late, a tooth infection. And you, standing in the doorway, suddenly understand how serious this could be. The warmth eases the tension. Then she begins to chant, not for show, but for calm. The patient joins her, humming through clenched teeth. The man before you is a stonecutter. Decades of grit and sand have worn his molars to nubs, but evidence suggests it was known, feared, and performed with grim determination. You watch as the healer prepares. She isn't a priest or a doctor in the formal sense. The healer burns sweetgrass and acacia resin, not just for smell, but to keep away evil winds thought to cause sickness. And how many were saved by someone like her, a woman with steady hands and the stubborn belief that pain could be pulled out by its roots. She's what scholars might call a local medic, a woman trained by experience, not scrolls. Blood is staunch with natron-soaked cloth, healing paste made from fig, date resin, and charcoal leaves packed into the hollow. On top rests a broken chew stick, laid like an offering. Nearby, a scrap of linen bears a scrawled symbol in open mouth, a drop of water, a flame, a prayer for relief. Two meanings, life and afterlife, both hinged on the mouth. That perhaps the same motion used to free a tongue in death was first learned from treating the living. The sounds are soft crickets, the faint lap of river water, the creak of rope pulling against a docked boat. She boils water, grinds herbs, and opens her kit. That even when the world is built from dust and river reeds, there's still room for healing. Inside, bronze tweezers, linen strips, a palmwood splint, and something small and wicked-looking, a tooth chisel. It was shaped like a curved blade half-key, half-chisel. Symbolically, it restored speech in the afterlife. You swallow gently. She starts by applying a poultice of garlic, onion juice, and honey to the man's cheek. Just a tooth removed in a clay-walled room while the stars watched. And then the extraction. How many teeth were cleaned? How many rinses stirred? How many children soothed with mint and prayer? Not because it was glamorous, not because it was sacred, but because it had to be done. One pharaoh had an abscess that extended into the jawbone. Another had evidence of multiple failed extractions. Some of these people died with their pain unfinished, and someone else had the patience to help. A wedge placed between gum and enamel. A firm twist. Pop like thunder underwater. The man cries out, but only once, then silence, relief, and just like that, the danger passes. Toothaches were no small matter. A single abscess could kill. In fact, several mummies, including royalty, show signs of advanced dental infections, so severe they likely led to sepsis. Historians still argue whether dental extraction was common or reserved for the most desperate cases. You step outside for air. Stars are still there, indifferent but familiar. Behind you, the patient is sleeping. You wonder how many people died not from warfare or starvation, but from something as small as a tooth. It humbles you. Further down the village path, you find a shrine, just a simple stack of stones beneath a fig tree. And then you remember. The Egyptians had a word, pasesh, which referred to a ceremonial instrument used to open the mouth of a mummy during burial. But some scholars believe it also had roots in dental practice. One gesture. You walk slowly now, back toward the quiet edge of the village, and your mind drifts, wondering how many acts of care happened here in silence, because someone was hurting. No headlines, no monuments. And that's maybe the most beautiful part. Not the invention of toothpaste itself, but the persistence. The belief that comfort matters, that pain can be addressed. You breathe deeply. The night feels cleaner somehow. Somewhere behind you in the healer's hut, the patient dreams free at last of the burning. The pressure, the worm that was never real, but always feared. You smile gently, because tonight you understand. Every civilization begins with the care of small things. And sometimes the smallest thing is a tooth. The next morning arrives on a hush of linen, just before the city stirs. A pink glow brushes over temple pylons. Sails begin to stir along the Nile, and you're back in the company of scribes. This time, you're seated inside a school courtyard, where young students, barefoot and bleary-eyed, are beginning their day with recitation and curiously brushing their teeth. Yes, even among ink-stained fingers and slates covered in hieroglyphs, the daily ritual of dental care continues. Each student carries a small pouch tied at the waist, filled with their chew stick, a lump of natron, and a cloth-wrapped mint paste that has clearly seen better days. But the tools are there. The habit is there. Their teacher, an elderly man with a voice like crushed papyrus, supervises from the shade, because even future scribes needed to speak clearly. And you can recite royal lineage or the deeds of gods with a mouth full of yesterday's bread. It's a barter, but it's also a kind of morning handshake. Hygiene and community, hand in hand. One boy holds out a palmful of salt mint powder to his classmate, who nods solemnly and offers a few drops of vinegar in return. You listen as their teacher begins a short lesson not on writing today, but on the cleanliness of speech. He speaks of Mat, the principle of cosmic balance, truth, and order. Your words, he tells them, should be clean enough to offer to a god. His wife laughs and hands him a small shell filled with crushed barley and palm oil. He dips a finger in and scrubs with a kind of lazy grace. Just as the body was washed with natron before prayer or meals, so too was the mouth treated with respect. A quick rinse, a chew of mint, a scratch behind the molars with a palmwood pick. The sun catches the gold hoop in his ear, and for a brief moment, he looks like royalty.
Ow.
Do not let your tongue be sharpened by decay. You hear one being sung now, softly in the breeze. You blink. It's poetic. But it also feels like the most eloquent way of saying, brush your teeth or else. Tooth cleaning practices filter down through society. Pottery shards with remnants of tooth powders have been found in workers' villages. Brush tools have turned up in humble homes, buried near oil lamps and cooking pots. And then he gestures to the corner of the courtyard, where a small shrine to Thoth, the god of wisdom, has been decorated not only with ink pots and red pens, but with chew sticks, rinsing bowls, and fresh herbs. Apparently, even divine wisdom appreciates good oral hygiene. Now, don't misunderstand this. Wasn't a luxury reserved for children of priests and scribes. Even fishermen kept bundles of chewing twigs soaked in vinegar and honey, ready to scrub away the grit and scale of a long day on the water. You pass one such fisherman now. He's sitting near the river, flossing between his teeth with a frayed thread pulled from a linen tunic. The groom, meanwhile, might chew fresh myrrh leaves or apply a powder of dried mint and burnt fig to whiten his teeth. Not because of his jewelry, but because of his care. Across Egypt, hygiene was often woven into the rhythm of life. Small acts, repeated, respected, about meeting the world with a mouth that was clean, ready, and fragrant with intention. Some families even had lullabies that doubled as brushing reminders. One of them gestures to her gums and says something that makes them both cackle. It was alive, emotional, sometimes even joyful. You catch only the word setcum, which loosely translates to peppermouth, probably a reference to a too spicy rinse. Scrub with salt, my little pearl. Let your teeth be white and swirl. When the stars are full and high, wash your breath and close your eye. Historians still argue whether sweet breath was a poetic convention or a reflection of real grooming rituals. But either way, it tells us something. It's adorable, slightly haunting. But more importantly, it works. Children would grow up with a rhythm of care that followed them into adulthood, not because anyone told them to, but because everyone did. And speaking of adulthood, marriage rituals, too, had their own curious dental customs. Before a wedding, the bride might prepare a special mouth rinse sweetened with dates, perfumed with cinnamon or blue lotus too. Ensure that her first kiss as a wife would be memorable. One bridal poem you find scribbled in red ink on a potsherd reads, "She spoke, and her breath was the bloom of tamarind. I followed her words like bees to nectar. Her teeth were pearls, her tongue the sweetest reed." Now, whether this was literal or a lovesick exaggeration is up for debate. They noticed, cared, not about perfection, not about dazzle, but about presentation, about effort. You pause at a communal well now, where two older women are sharing a joke between rinses. Even pain, it seems, was an opportunity for laughter. And that's the truth buried beneath all this chewing, rinsing, mixing, and muttering. Oral care wasn't a sterile obligation. It was sung. It was whispered. It was shared. You walk on, past the school, past the well, into a quieter part of the city, thinking how strange it is that something as small as a tooth can reveal so much about a civilization, not just what they knew, but who they were. You've left the city behind again just for a while. The road stretches long and flat, lined with dry acacia bushes and dotted with distant silhouettes of herders and traders, one where trade, language, and ideas pass through like smoke in the wind. The sky has gone pale, like a page waiting to be written on. Egypt may have been first at least, first to record it, but the idea of mouth care traveled. And where are you headed now? To the fringes, to the lands just beyond the reach of the pharaoh's gaze, where Egypt met its neighbors. Because here's something fascinating. Toothpaste wasn't an isolated invention. And tucked between jars of grain and bolts of dyed linen, find something that shouldn't surprise you anymore. Bundles of tooth-cleaning sticks. The Cellera woman from the kingdom of Cush explains that her people chew it not just for cleaning, but for spiritual balance. It calms the heart, she says, tapping her chest. Trade brought spices like cardamom and clove, which soon found their way into elite Egyptian mouth powders. In turn, Egyptian natron made its way into foreign baths and rituals. Not Egyptian. It evolved. Passed down, believed in, and clung to like a charm. A man from Byblos shares a tooth legend about a demon who lives in the jawbone. Whispering lies, maybe, but the laughter that follows suggests it doesn't matter. It's a story, a teaching, memory carried in breath. Only wine and salt can drown him, he says with a wink. You arrive at a dusty outpost market, more tent than temple, where goods from Nubia, the Levant, and even distant Mesopotamia exchange hands with a tired sort of ritual. Another Babylonian remedy recommends massaging sore gums with sheep fat and chanting to Ea, god of water, but recognizably similar. It's sharp, earthy, and somehow cooling. Mapping the stars, it still shared space with countless others who had their own ways of coping with the body's little miseries. It's made from boiled pine resin and crushed olives. Keeps the mouth cool in dry winds, he tells you. This variety has a thinner core, a bitter smell, and is dyed with red ochre. culture offering their own twist, their own spice, their own story. You nod respectfully and take one. Egypt's dental traditions didn't just influence outsiders, they absorbed outside methods, too.
Someone nearby.
Brews tea with licorice root, a plant, known even then to soothe the throat and freshen the breath. But a tradition of care passed across time and border, then perhaps it's one of humanity's finest inventions after all. Your breath, flavored faintly with licorice and dust, feels calm. You're offered a cup, sweet, warming, and not entirely unlike that ancient Egyptian rinse from the temple apothecary. Historians still argue whether these exchanges were intentional collaborations or happy accidents. But the result is the same. A regional dental culture rooted in common materials and shared discomfort. After all, tooth pain knows no borders. A little further on, you encounter a Canaanite merchant applying a greenish-black paste to his gums. Is it effective? Debatable? Is it pungent? Absolutely. But like so many remedies you've seen, it's more than function, it's tradition. Later, you rest beside a trader's campfire. As the sun begins to melt behind the dunes, you begin to realize something oddly comforting. The need for clean teeth, the need for rest, for ritual, for relief, is one of the few things that connects us all. Is he serious? You begin to see that even when Egypt was at the height of its power-building pyramids carving obelisks, one clay tablet from Sumer, roughly contemporary with the Ebers Papyrus, describes a dental powder made from ash, beer dregs, and crushed shells. Sound familiar? They're all riffs on a theme, even across distance, even without Instagram influencers or toothpaste commercials. People figured it out. And they did it the same way we still do. Through mess, through memory, through mother's advice, and trial and error. You lean back now, staring up at the emerging stars. Which raises an interesting point. How much of today's oral care is genuinely new? Modern mouthwashes contain alcohol and mint check. So did Egyptian ones. We use bristles, powders, and paste. Check. So did they. We care about breath, speech, smile. Check, check, check. Maybe the only real difference is branding. And as you sip your tea and listen to the quiet shifting of sand under sleeping camels, Egypt may have written it down first. But everyone else filled in the blanks. And in that, there's something deeply human. Not advanced. Not miraculous. Just honest. You rise slowly, brush the sand from your robe, and begin the walk back toward the city. The stars guide your steps. And you think to yourself, if this is the legacy of toothpaste, not just a formula, but a tradition of care passed across time and border, then perhaps it's one of humanity's finest inventions after all. The city greets you again with quiet familiarity. Streets are softer now, washed clean by the night breeze. Lamps flicker in alcoves, casting lazy shadows on stone walls. A cat yawns on a temple step. Somewhere a low hymn hums from a window. You walk slowly through it all, past homes and courtyards that now feel layered with meaning, each doorway hiding a chew stick, each basin echoing with rinses long forgotten, and yet not forgotten entirely. You remember them. Tonight, you remember everything. She sings a tune you've heard before, but now you understand it more deeply. You drift toward a small home nestled near a weaving workshop. The door is open. Inside, a family gathers for their nightly routine. The children are half asleep, heads nodding. But one of them, perhaps 5 or 6, still clutches a soft-tipped chew twig, stubbornly scrubbing between yawns. His grandmother sits beside him with a bowl of warm salt water and mint. Bitter root makes sweet the tongue. Clean the mouth where words are sung. Bless the teeth and wash the day. Then let the night take pain away. It's a spell. And every one of them, from scribe to boatman, from farmer to queen, knew the strange truth. A clean mouth brought peace, tastefully. To greet your neighbor with breath that did not offend. These were the small things that built a civilization, a reminder, a gentle ceremony of care. The ink-stained prayers to Thoth and Sekhmet embassed it all, calling for relief, for cleansing, for sweetness, to speak without shame, to pray with a clean mouth, to kiss, to smile, healing, hygiene, and maybe in some quiet corner of their imaginations, hope, to laugh, to love. It's not just a lullaby. The whole story comes together. Ancient Egyptian dental care was in tea some isolated curiosity. It was part of the great rhythmic heartbeat of life. Because here, in the hush of sleepiness and flickering light, it was everywhere and for everyone. Your own breath feels clean, your own teeth present, grounding. The palace had gold scrapers and cinnamon rinses. The worker's hut had vinegar and palm fronds. The priest had chants and lotus dust. Not just comfort, but dignity. To speak clearly. You think again of the toothpicks found in tombs, the scrolls with recipes. You realize something that chills you softly in the best way. The toothpaste wasn't just about the teeth. It was about what the teeth allowed you to do. To eat with joy. The people of this ancient land, these wearers of linen, these builders of empires knew that real power began not with monuments, but with morning breath. And so they invented something small, something practical, something passed from palm to palm, home to temple, tongue to tongue. And they called it knowledge. You step back into the street, moonlight painting silver stripes across the paving stones. And as you walk past the final rows of closed shops and shuttered homes, you find yourself smiling. Because what began with burnt eggshells, myrrh resin, and a few sharp twigs turned out to be something eternal, a whisper across time, a reason to care. A reason to open your mouth and say, "Good morning." The streets are still now. Even the Nile sleeps. You find yourself seated beneath a fig tree, its branches curling above like a lullaby cast in wood. The world around you has softened into velvet, no sharp edges, no harsh sounds. Just the steady rhythm of silence and stars. Breathe in. You're safe. You're clean. You're connected to thousands of years of sleepy brushing, of gentle rinses, of nightly chants shared between parent and child, healer and patient, priest and penitent. You can almost hear them now, the soft scrape of a twig on enamel, the trickle of rinse poured into a clay cup, the warm hush of a mother's voice. Let the pain be gone. Let the day wash away. The air smells faintly of mint and acacia wood. Somewhere, a boat creaks gently against its mooring. Your body grows heavier, warmer, like linen warmed by sun. You imagine your own rituals, the evening glass of water, the final stretch, the slow blink of tired eyes. And you realize that this moment, this quiet winding down, is something our ancestors knew well. The small acts that prepare you for rest, the sacredness of routine. So tonight, let your mind drift like a reed on the Nile. No worries, no rush, just the memory of clean mouths and kind hands, of temples and kitchens, of chants and chew sticks, breath that smelled like myrrh and hope. Sleep well, traveler. May your dreams be minty fresh.